Hello everyone and welcome to Magic Gathering Strat. I'm Binkabi and this will be some spoiler talks for Magic Origins. So I bet that few of you have missed that this will be the last core set that Wizards will do, at least for the foreseeable future. It's supposed to bring back a lot of good stuff and show us some more story of some of the planeswalkers like Gideon, Jace and so forth when their sparks ignited. So it's a pretty heavy set on the lore. Anyway, I've chosen a few cards to talk about today. Some of them displays the new mechanics and some of them just displays sweet cards and cards that are worth talking about. So with no further ado, let's move on to the first card. First card I want to talk about is Goblin Piledriver. Yes, it's getting reprinted in a standard legal set, which also means that it will be legal in modern. And there is a lot of hype around this card now that it will be really sweet and so forth. And despite being a Goblin lover myself, I'm not so sure that Goblin Piledriver is enough. Now bear in mind, when I make this video, there is no other good Goblin card spoiled yet, but there is potential for like Goblin Lackey and or Goblin Ringleader still. And if one or both of those cards would see a reprint, making them modern legal, I could really see Goblin be a driving force in modern, since Edivile is legal and most of the good Goblins will then be legal, so... But if that's not the case, I don't think Piledriver is enough to push Goblins into a tier 1 deck. I mean, is this really what the deck is lacking to be super competitive? I don't think so. It's really good, but protection from blue is not as good as it used to be, and yeah, it's not like Rabble Master, who is a one-man army. This one needs help, so I'm a bit cautious with the hype, but I think the card could be really good, depending on what else gets spoiled. So let's move on to Knight of the White Orchid. A pretty good card. Will be interesting to see how it takes place in standard. I mean, it's a pretty old card by now, but it's still a 2/2 first strike for 2, which is decent, and you get to search up a plains card, so it basically ramps you a bit as well. What I'm worried about is if this is good enough today. I mean, for example, we already have a double white 2/2 for 2, the Anaffensa, Keen Tree Spirit, and I think that's just straight up better than this, and that card is not seeing much play. Granted, this card is a bit more explosive, but it's still a 2-drop that you want to be playing on turn 3 to get the benefit. Otherwise it's just strictly worse than something like Soulfire Grandmaster if you can activate it. So I also think this is a pretty safe reprint. I don't think it will shake up the formats all that much. So starting off a bit cautious with my expectations on the first 2 cards. However, the next one, now we're getting to the good stuff. Languish, or however it's supposed to be pronounced. This is sweet. This is exactly what we have been missing, at least from my point of view as a control player. The last year, if you have been playing control, you're either forced to play like Esper, and then you've been playing Crooks of Faith or something. And 5 mana is just too much. It's too much for the first mass removal. The other option that would make sense to play is Drown in Sorrow, which only costs 3, but that's too low. -2/-2 is not enough to kill stuff. If your opponent goes like Fleeceman Line into Siege Rhino, they're just laughing at you. Granted, Languish can't kill Siege Rhino either. It can clean up most small stuff pretty early in the game, which is really important. So I think this card alone, together with the the Crooks of Faith or potential other blacks mass removal could make a blue-black control deck emerge. And as a huge bonus, this one kills Dragon Lord Oyutai as well, meaning that you would have a huge advantage playing like blue-black against a Esper or blue-white control mirror. If they play Oyutai and you play Silumgar, whichever you want, this one kills Oyutai but not your guy, and they are forced to play Crooks of Faith that will actually kill both. So I'm really excited about this card. I think this will be really good. The only downside I can see is that it will probably be paired with Siege Rhino in the Absent control decks, and that will just be miserable to play against. Yes, they lose Thoughtseize in a while and so on, but having a control deck being able to sweep against all decks with smaller creatures and have their creatures survive, that's just filthy. So prepare to see this card alongside Siege Rhinos for the foreseeable future. Next one is also a really cool one. It's Pia and Kiran Nalar, and if I'm not totally mistaken, that's supposed to be Chandra's parents. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the thing. And people have said it's the small Siege Gang commander, and that's basically true, but this is 4 power for 4 mana. That's already pretty good, split up into 3 permanents. But 2 of the power also have flying, which is worth noting. So already there I would say it's playable. It's more than enough for standard. Then you add on the 3 mana sack an artifact to deal 2 damage. That's just really good. Not only can you throw the stupid birds if they don't have anything else to do, you can also throw leftover artifacts from other stuff that you might have laying around, and it's just a pretty good way to have reach. And it's also a nightmare to deal with this for any slower deck. If you play this and they play like ultimate price, sure they kill this, but you have 2 1/1 flying tokens left. That's really good. So I'd expect this card to see a lot of standard play. Probably not in modern, I think it's too expensive. There is other stuff you can do for 2 red that just ends the game, but maybe. But yeah, I'd expect this to see a huge amount of standard. Let's go on to the flip planeswalkers. I've chosen Gideon to represent the flip planeswalkers, and the point with the flip planeswalkers is that on the first side, on the main side, whatever, there are creatures, and then when you manage to fulfill the requirements, their planeswalker spark will ignite and they will flip and become the planeswalker that we know today. So Gideon, Hero of Akros, is a 2/1 for 1, already pretty playable. With the little bonus of 3 mana, he gains indestructible until end of turn. So I'd say that is already good. And then at the end of combat, if this one and 2 other creatures attacked, you get to flip him into Gideon Battleforged, which can make 1 creature attack him, or untap something and give it indestructible until your next turn. So you have a pretty good blocker as well, and then you can make him into a 4/4. So it's nothing new. It's pretty close to the first Gideon actually, with force attacks and stuff, but without the -2 destroy. But you can't have it all. Also, on a side note, I just have to say that this looks completely bonkers in Tiny Leaders. I will be making another video shortly about Tiny Leaders, and I will talk about the flip planeswalkers a bit more, but I just can't see this being accepted as a commander for very long. A white weenie deck that is guaranteed to have a good 1-drop every game, and that 1-drop within short order will flip into a planeswalker, and you will have to deal with this every single time they have mana to play it. I just can't see that being fair at all. So heads up, tiny leader players, we will have Gideon Battleforged everywhere. Alright, now to a card that I'm pretty excited about actually. I think this is so sweet. The Demonic Pact, the enchantment for 2 black. You can choose one of the 4 modes every upkeep, but you can choose a mode that has already been chosen. So you can deal 4 damage to something and gain 4 life. You can force your opponent to discard 2 cards. You can draw 2 cards, and you can lose the game. Obviously the last mode is not super good, and that's basically the point of the card. And this card was actually one of the contenders to be the player-made card. I'm not sure if people remembers that, but I think it was like a year or maybe 2 years ago. The community got to submit ideas and their opinions on a card that we would make together. So we chose color, we chose card type, and so on. The only downside to that was, if I'm not mistaken, that it was only the Americans that could do this. So unfortunately for me in Sweden I couldn't do much. But it could be that everyone was allowed to vote on the card, but when it came to the actual text box, we couldn't submit if we weren't from America. I'm not sure, but this was a contender. Waste Not was the card that won, obviously, and got printed, but they obviously decided to print this as well. And I'm actually very excited to play this, because I think this could be the card that I've been looking for a specific deck I have in mind. I won't spoil too much, but it contains Descent into Madness. I'm not gonna say anything else, but I'm gonna build a deck and play a few games and see if it can hold up. But I think that deck will be pretty sweet actually, and this seems like the payoff card that you really wanted, so we will see. The second to last card is basically a functional reprint of Demonic Tutor. Not really, but almost. For 5 mana you get to search your library for a card and take it to your hand. Then if you have Spellmaster active, which is one of the new mechanics, which means if there are 2 or more instants and or sorceries in your graveyard, you get a bonus. In this case you get 3 black mana. Black. So you can't cast this until turn 5, but if you do, you get 3 mana back. And I just have to say that this looks really sweet. Maybe not as a 4-off, but at least a 2-off in most decks that can support the spell mastery part. There is so few ways to not get what you want out of this. If you need like a removal spell, you can fetch it up and use it right away. If you need something like a win condition, it's pretty likely that you can cast this and have 1 mana over to cast whatever you want to cast. And I just can't see this being bad. I think this is really good and I'd like to try it out. The downside of course being that it's very heavy black. If you have like an equal deck, blue and black, or something, white or black, the triple black could be really hard. Alright, let's move on to the last card. From the Demonic Tutor to Time Twister. Holy crap. Have you seen this card? It's basically Time Twister. It's almost a Power 9 card. Of course it's a little bit weaker and a little bit more, how should I say this? It's harder to break than Time Twister. So for 3 mana you force everyone to shuffle their hand and graveyard into their library and draw a new hand of 7 cards. The downside of this card is that you have to end your turn, if it's your turn. So every shenanigans with Waste Not or what is it, Liliana's Caress and stuff like that will not work, because they will go on the stack, but the turn will end, so they will not do anything. So why is this card good? Well, it's basically a draw 7 if you have, let's say, some instants to play. Then you get to play this, have a bunch of mana open, pass the turn, and if you have some counter spells and removals, despite them doing something, you can just fire off your spells and you will be on equal terms again. With the little exception that your deck is built to take advantage of this, your opponent's is not. So you will draw more card draw spells and more removal and more good spells, and your opponent will not, most likely. It could also be really good in a burn deck, as it turns out. Like turn 1, Lava Spike, turn 2, burn off some other stuff, turn 3 you can play this, or empty your hand completely and then play this. I just can't see a burn play losing if that's the case. Especially since a lot of the decks that burn could potentially lose taste the faster combo decks, and forcing them to discard their whole hand could actually be really good, because they spend their first turns setting up their combo, and if they have to draw 7 new cards, you have no idea of knowing if you will get the combo pieces or not. So I can really see this be quite good in a burn deck as well. And also, I'm trying to restrain myself here, but Tiny Leaders, anyone? Time Twister in Tiny Leaders? Seems pretty broken to me. The format where you have mental missteps and disrupting shoals and cheap, obviously, removal and stuff. That seems really good to me. I just have to think that this card will be pretty bonkers in that format as well. And something that is worth noting is that this card doesn't exile itself, which later incarnations of broken cards have tended to do, like the Miracle Time Walk that exiles itself, for example. This one does not, so you can actually you can't run out of it. You can, if you have one of those in your deck, you will not mill yourself out, and that is also pretty relevant in some cases. So yeah, that's basically what I have for today. There is a lot of cool cards in Magic Origins besides the ones that I've talked about. So check out the new Planeswalkers, check out the cool Spell Mastery cards. I think they're really neat. There is one mechanic that we have actually missed that we should jump over and talk about, and that is there you are. Let's take this dude. Renown or whatever it's supposed to be pronounced. Basically, it's kind of similar to the mechanic from Conspiracy. When you hit the one with the highest life total, you get +1/+1 counters. This one just has to deal combat damage to a player, and then if it doesn't have been renowned, it will be that and get X number of +1/+1 counters. So this is a 2/3 vigilance for 3. If it hits, it becomes a 4/5. So it's pretty good. Interestingly enough, this keyword was first translated into fame for some reason, at least for us in Sweden, and that seemed so lame. Oh, my Citadel Castellan hits you, now he's famous, or she's famous. That just seems so bad. So luckily enough, that was not the case. It was actually supposed to be Renown. So that's good. So all of those cards seems a bit underpowered for standard, except for the one that draws cards when cards get renowned. But I don't foresee it being something broken or something like that. I just don't see that being the case. If you're playing an aggressive deck that is able to attack your opponent without your creatures dying or getting blocked, then this part is pretty win more. It's like, yeah, I'm attacking freely, glad my guys is a bit smaller, but now gets a bit bigger. I just don't see that being a thing. Probably a few of those will be played, but most of them seems pretty underwhelming to me. So sadly we end on a pretty low note, but that's okay. Renown I don't think is that sweet. Spellmaster, however, seems really good, just because how easy it is to trigger. You don't have to work hard for it to be active, and when it's active you get to reap all the benefits, so that seems good. Yeah, that's it. I'm gonna make a Tiny Leader talk video as well, so stay tuned for that, and hopefully next week I can actually be making some gameplay videos again. I've just been so busy with random stuff and real life tournaments, so yeah, it has been pretty hard for me to make more videos. So enjoy this and stay tuned for the next ones. Thank you for watching.